Hello again. This is Josh Scherrer, author of the book 2020. I'm back with more questions to answer. And today we are going to answer questions about the chapter on June. So here we go. Giselle asks, why do the roamers keep coming back and what do they want with humans? So we've kind of answered this question before, but the roamers are most likely looking for food. And short of, actual food that we would normally consume as humans, I don't know if you can see my hands moving all over the place, but we are the food source for roamers by this point, especially once we get into June. There's kind of a lack of food probably because, keep in mind, food doesn't just magically appear. Food has to come from shipments that come in. And if the entire nation is affected by this pandemic, if you will, this outbreak, then those food shipments would have stopped, meaning the roamers are now looking for any food source that they can find. So that's why they are attacking humans. Tabitha asks, is Marlon's brother still alive, and where does he live? So there are quite a few questions about Marlon's brother in this round of questioning. So I'm going to do my best to answer it as best as I can, and then I'll kind of go back to it each time. But we don't know for sure if Marlon's brother is alive or not. We'll find out what we think his fate is, but we don't really know. And that's part of the mystery of the whole book, is we don't really know what's going on with a lot of Marlon's family. And so we assume, at least for now, that his brother is alive. His brother lives in Henderson in the book. Whether or not he's still there or if he's somewhere else, we really don't know. So Devin asked, at the end of the chapter, there were helicopters. Does that mean that there are more civilians out there that made a pact, and did they join forces and live in a town to protect? So the helicopter question also comes up quite a bit in this round. And so the short answer to that one, too, is we don't know. If there was a town that had civilians living in it, that's very probable. Humans are going to do what they can to stick together to survive if they can get over the fact that they are very afraid of people who are around them. It's kind of strange how much it mirrors what's going on in our world today because, we as humans, generally speaking, want to help each other out. But at the same time, we have to be very careful and we kind of draw ourselves back because we don't want to accidentally get exposed to the coronavirus, right? And so for humans in the book, they probably share that same mentality. They want to help each other out, but at the same time, they don't want to get exposed to TBR. And not knowing exactly how TBR spreads, not knowing if you can be a carrier or not, or if you can only get infected if it's, contact with blood of the infected or whatever, or a bite or who knows. People are going to be very cautious. So are there a bunch of these towns? Are there any towns? We don't know. And if there were, would a helicopter be from a town that is, protecting itself, or would it be from a military base, or would it be from a hospital, or, we don't know, but the helicopter becomes very symbolic by the end of the chapter. But then throughout the book, what does that helicopter mean? Okay, good question. So the next is Kayla. She says, what would have happened if the father just stayed and not shot the guy? Okay. So we don't really know the answer to that. It kind of goes back to, as the author, we have to make these moral choices. And so Marlon and his father made that moral choice to shoot the guy. Was it the right choice? We don't know. And that's really for you to decide, for every reader to decide. And I kind of just put that out there as the author for that book. All right, so Brandon asked, why did he swear to protect his brother? Really, I have a brother, and, although we are older and, we live fairly far apart, he's my little brother, and I still would protect him if I could. And I think it's just something that you share when you grow up together. And it's something that Marlon would have felt for his brother as well, that he would do what he could to protect him if he could. So the next question is from Cherokee, and wants to know, why did I make it so where the guy at the store kept shooting even after they said they were civilized people? Was it because he didn't want them to take his supplies, or was there for another reason? So this is a very good example of the morality of the book. Okay, I've used the term morality a lot for these question and answer sessions. And so we have to think about, as the reader, to what extent would you go to survive? And so Marlon and his dad, they go to the IGA for supplies because they had already gone to Walmart. They'd already gotten the supplies there. IGA was a grocery store in town they had not gone to yet. So they go. Even if they could have escaped, like gone out of the gunfire, they don't. They go forward and they attack, and eventually they kill that man that was there. Now, was he there because he had laid claim to all of IGA and he was like the king of IGA and he was defending his own territory? Or maybe he was a criminal to begin with, and so he was violent already. Or maybe he had, sort of like Marlon, killed so many roamers that his first reaction was violence and not reason. And so we don't really know the full answer to that as readers. But I specifically placed that there in the story because I wanted to present this moral question of, if we collectively say, okay, fine, roamers, they can die. Like, the moral choice is clear. They're suffering anyway. Put them out of their misery, whatever. Okay. But if faced with actual humans that are identical to Marlon in terms of their mentality, is it still the morally right choice to kill a fellow human being? And that's what the reader has to determine. Was Marlon morally right or not? Okay, so the next question is from Cecilia. Does he ever get to see his brother again? Stay tuned, and you'll find out. Addison asked, how did his brother die? And if he was still alive, what would they be doing? Okay, so not going to give that away yet because his brother will play a role at some point, either actually there or, even if his brother was dead, Marlon doesn't know that. So he would still be a driving force for Marlon to find out the fate of his brother. But what would they be doing if none of that had happened? Unfortunately, probably a lot of the same as what a lot of adults do with their siblings once they move out of the house. And that's, text each other once in a while, maybe see each other every so often, especially if you live far away. You take each other for granted. And that's kind of one of those things that we look at in the book is Marlon clearly has taken for granted his family, not just his immediate family, not just Anne and his children, but his extended family as well. And so we see that in the book, Marlon coming to grips with the fact that he's kind of wasted those relationships throughout most of his life. Okay, so Benjamin asked if Marlon is going to try and get some help from the military since he was so interested by the helicopters in the sky. Again, maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't want to give too much away. But you have to keep in mind that Marlon realizes that he has killed people, especially after the IGA incident. He has killed a human that was not infected as far as he knew. And so there is going to be some guilt associated with that. And with that guilt, it's kind of like if you were in a bad situation and you knew you needed help, but you were ashamed of what you did, would you still go seek that help? And that's kind of where Marlon is at, is would he really want to go get help because of his actions, because he's so ashamed of what he did. All right. The next question is from Jada, who mentions that there was a coyote, and Marlon said there was still hope for this outbreak to end. So the coyote, a lot like the helicopter, is symbolic. And that symbolism is kind of what I mentioned in the previous Q&A session of there really was not any wildlife. So if you have a coyote who's just out there minding its own business, coyotes kind of scavenge for food as well as hunt for food. If there is a predator out there, if there's a coyote out there, that means there are other prey out there, other animals out there. And so if that is happening, if he sees that, that means that the roamer presence is going down. And if the roamer presence is going down, maybe that outbreak has peaked and maybe things will get better. We don't know at the time that he saw the coyote, but that is kind of his hope. All right, so the next question is from Brianna, and kind of talked about this. Why did Marlon feel guilty when he shot the man at the store when the guy attacked him? So yes, the man attacks first. That's pretty clear in the book, but why would you feel guilty? Probably the same reason why Marlon feels guilty at the beginning, even just killing roamers. It's another human being, and even though he's attacked, he took a life, and that is something that Marlon struggles with throughout the book. Chelsea asked, what will you do to find out what the roamers are and where they come from? So in the later chapters, we actually figure out a little bit about the roamers. So stay tuned. Jory asked, will Marlon be able to truly adapt to these harder times? He didn't hesitate in the IGA to shoot the man, but when faced with the situation again and given more time to think about it, how will he react? Will he do the same as he did in the IGA to protect himself and his family, or hesitate and maybe lose his father or his own life? So Jory, you hit the nail on the head. And in addition to these moral choices that Marlon has to make, the other part of the book is all about how Marlon adapts. And so if the book is about the downfall of humanity, how far will Marlon go to let his own humanity fall? And so will he adapt and improvise and try not to resort to violence, or will he succumb to violence and that's who he becomes as a person? That's what we find out in the later chapters. Neera asked, if it was you that killed the man in the grocery store, would you be upset that you killed a human like Marlon, or would you say it was self-defense and not care? I can tell you for a fact that I would definitely feel like Marlon. It's one of those cases where the author tries to put him or herself in the shoes of their characters. And so I absolutely would feel remorse and regret and probably question every single thing that I had done to that point. Because, again, it goes back to killing roamers is one thing, because you could justify that as self-defense. They are animals attacking you. They don't really have this consciousness anymore as far as we know. But this guy did. This guy was defending himself just like Marlon and his dad were defending themselves at their house. And so to take that extra step, that next step of assaulting a fellow unaffected, non-infected human being, that would be a moral choice that I would personally really struggle with, and which is also why Marlon in turn struggles with it in the book. Okay, so Carla asks, what would you do if you saw a helicopter during the outbreak like the story? I would probably cautiously optimistic. And what I mean by that is, hooray, there is something that's civilized out there, but at the same time, where is the helicopter going? Why are they not, sending any kind of relief? Clearly, the helicopter goes over and they could probably see what's going on from above. So, why the gap? Why no support? So I'd kind of be cautious about that as well. Okay, the next question is from Eric. Why did the man start to shoot at them when they went into the store? We kind of answered this one, Eric. But it is a central question. And again, we don't really know why he did, but he did. And it's really Marlon's reaction that kind of sets the stage for the rest of the book. Javon asked, why would you still help a guy you didn't even know? And he shot at you after you told him you were human. So that was, it's the journal of a man faced with humanity's downfall. And even though Marlon attacks and eventually he and his father kill the man, when they do that, we see that they are not completely ruthless in that attack. They justify their assault on him because they didn't know if he would continue pursuing them, if they left the store, or what exactly would happen. So once he is neutralized, once he is unarmed, they try to save him. And of course, they don't, but it kind of shows that they are still trying to be as civilized as possible. Okay, so the next question is, why does the mom think killing the roamers is murder? So the mom is kind of like this moral compass of the book. And even though those people are infected, they are still people, because the key word of that sentence, those people are infected, is the word people. And for the mom, it doesn't matter that they are infected. All that matters is that they are people and they need help. They don't need killed. And so she considers that murder. Johanna asked, why did you choose to point out that it was your brother's birthday at the beginning of the chapter? This is foreshadowing something that will happen in the future. So it is a little bit of foreshadowing, and it's also a way to introduce Marlon's emotions for his brother. If he's writing a journal, he would probably mark a lot of important dates in his life. And beyond your mother and father, who you don't really have the same relationship with as your sibling, his brother was his first friend growing up. Okay, and so he's someone that's special to Marlon. And so it's a little bit of foreshadowing, but it's also a little bit of revealing Marlon's emotions as well. So Emmanuel, what is the IGA? The IGA is in southern Indiana and Kentucky, a grocery chain. I think it actually stands for like International Grocers Association or something like that. But there are IGAs all over the southern part of the United States. And they're basically small grocery stores. Maria asked, why do you think the government are not helping the people with supplies they need to survive or helping them move to another place? And so, Maria, we don't really know exactly what the government's up to because we haven't really come into contact with them yet in the book. The government could be focusing on those huge metropolitan areas. Keep in mind that in southern Indiana, where the story is taking place at the moment, there are not a lot of people in regular times. In the outbreak, there's probably even fewer. And so you would go most likely as the government to wherever the most amount of people are so you could help the most amount of people. So that could be why we don't see them, or maybe the government has completely collapsed. We just don't know at this point what really is going on with the U.S. government. Gabriel asked, why does the mom get so upset at the patrols even though it's keeping them safe? Again, that goes back to she thinks that they are murdering people, that these roamers can't help it. If they are not actively attacking, there's no reason to go out and seek them out to kill them. Of course, I mentioned this in the last Q&A, like if there was a massive attack, what would they do? For Marlon and his dad, the reason why they go out on those patrols is to prevent those massive attacks, the swarms from coming. And so it's kind of that moral choice again. Do you go out and prevent a disaster, even though that disaster may never happen? Or do you take your chances and limit the amount of people, albeit roamers? Do you limit the number of roamers that you kill? And so that's really the kind of the moral decisions that Marlon and his father have to make. Okay, the next question is from Kylan. Why were the military helicopters flying above them? We don't know yet, and we'll find out. Alejandra asked, my question is, good and bad things are happening in Marlon's mind. So does he have faith when all these bad things are happening? And so that's an excellent question, Alejandra. And, being the author, I can tell you that, yes, he had faith. Now, the question, of course, is what was his faith? Was his faith in humanity? Was it faith in his family? Was it faith in God? We don't really know exactly what his faith was in. He doesn't talk about it a whole lot. He mentions Easter at the beginning of the book. He mentions, Jesus at the beginning of the book. So Marlon probably is a religious person. But if you're religious and you are faced with this situation, you are going to have to really question your faith. Do you have faith that everything will work out, or do you take matters into your own hands? And so Marlon, up until this point, has kind of taken matters into his own hands. So does he have faith that things will work out? Maybe, but he seems to be fairly impatient with that faith. Marcella asked, why does his mom not love him as much? And that's kind of a perception of Marlon. But, it has to be tough for a mother to see her son in turmoil, in pain because of the choices he's making. But also, his mother questions why Marlon is there and not seeking out his family, his wife and his children. Because a mother's love is mother's love, but it's not, the same as protecting your family. And so, I don't know if his mother really ever loved him less, but I think that dynamic between the two, the relationship between the two, Marlon and his mom, really changed as he stayed. Then Fabiola asked, my question for the author is, do you think the coyotes are like service dogs or something like that, and look at humans to maybe see if it's safe to go help you guys? So that's a very good insight and a very good question. So coyotes usually are fairly wild. I don't know of very many people that would be able to tame a coyote to use as a service animal. But the coyote in the book is kind of like this old saying of, you have a canary in a coal mine. Now, if you aren't familiar with the history of coal mining, you wouldn't really be familiar with that saying. But back in the 1800s and the early 1900s, they would send a bird in a cage down a coal mine. It didn't necessarily have to be a canary, but canary rhyme or alliterates with coal, so canary and coal sounds better than like blue jay. So the canary in the coal mine would be where they would take a bird or some other small animal down into the mine, and they would watch that bird. And if that bird started to go into distress or die, then they knew that there was a buildup of gas that was toxic and they needed to get out of the mine. Okay, so the workers would then evacuate. And so the saying "canary in a coal mine" goes to the fact that canaries were smaller, so they kind of were almost this gauge of danger. And so for me, I use the coyote as the author as kind of this gauge. If the canary is fine in a coal mine, then it's fine for the humans that were there. If a coyote is running around and isn't getting eaten by a roamer, then maybe, just maybe, it will be fine for uninfected humans to be out and about as well. Now, whether or not that's true kind of remains to be seen, but it's kind of a foreshadowing event. And I use the coyote just because in rural southern Indiana, coyotes are constantly out. And so if any predator is out, it's probably a coyote. All right, so that does it for the questions for this month. I will be back with the month of July very shortly. I, again, am very appreciative of all the questions that you have, and some of them are really hard questions. Like, I really have to think as the author, why I did what I did in terms of the book. But again, I hope you continue to enjoy reading the novel, and I look forward to reading through your questions for the month of July. Until then, take care, and I will see you soon.